Welcome to this journey into the shadows of America's past. I'm your host, and this is a place where we uncover the stories history tried to bury, the whispers that echo through abandoned halls, and the secrets that refuse to stay silent. Before we begin, I'd like to know, where are you watching this from? And what time is it where you are? Drop a comment below. There's something uniquely haunting about sharing these stories across time zones, connecting through darkness, no matter where we are in the world. Tonight we travel back to 1844, to the cobblestone streets and grand mansions of Charleston, South Carolina, a city built on cotton, commerce, and the brutal institution that sustained it all. Charleston in the 1840s was a jewel of the American South, where fortunes were made and lost in the span of a single auction, where reputation meant everything, and where the enslaved were bought and sold like cattle in the markets near the harbor. On a sweltering June afternoon in 1844, the largest slave auction of the season took place at Ryan's Mart on Chalmers Street. Hundreds of people gathered under the hot sun. Merchants, plantation owners, curious onlookers. The air was thick with humidity and the sound of the auctioneer's voice echoing off the brick walls. Among the dozens of human beings sold that day, one woman stood out in a way that would be remembered for generations, though not for the reasons anyone expected. Her name was Delphine Rousseau, 28 years old. Creole heritage from Louisiana. The auction records describe her in clinical, disturbing detail: exceptional beauty, light brown skin, green eyes, fluent in French and English, trained in household management, no visible scars. The bidding for Delphine was unlike anything witnesses had seen before. It went on for nearly an hour. Men shouted over each other, drove the price to astronomical heights. When the hammer finally fell, she had been purchased for a sum equivalent to over $100,000 in today's money by Cornelius Ashford, one of Charleston's wealthiest cotton merchants. The crowd that day whispered about her beauty. They called her the most desired woman ever sold in Charleston. But what they saw as desire, Delphine saw as something else entirely: a weapon, a tool, an opportunity. Within 6 months of arriving at Ashford Manor, the Ashford family would be destroyed, not by violence, not by fire, not by any visible force. They would be torn apart from within, consumed by obsession, jealousy, madness, and death. Thomas Ashford, the eldest son, would die in a duel with his own brother. Cornelius Ashford would take his own life after financial ruin. Margaret Ashford, the family matriarch, would be committed to an asylum after attempting murder. William Ashford would vanish entirely, wanted for crimes that would never be fully explained. And Elizabeth Ashford, the daughter, would spend the rest of her life trying to understand what had happened to her family. The official records are sparse: death certificates, property transfers, a few newspaper articles that hint at scandal without providing details. But there are other documents: hidden letters, secret diaries, testimony from servants, medical records from Dr. Edmund Harcourt, the family physician who watched the Ashfords disintegrate and tried desperately to understand why. And at the center of it all was Delphine Rousseau, beautiful, intelligent, calculating, a woman who understood that, in a world where she had no legal rights, no freedom, no voice, she still possessed one undeniable form of power. The question that haunted Charleston then, and continues to disturb historians today, is simple but profound. How did one enslaved woman destroy an entire family? Was it purely manipulation and seduction? Was there something darker at work? And most troubling of all, the evidence suggests she wasn't working alone. What you're about to hear is the documented story of the Ashford family tragedy of 1844, a case that was quietly buried by Charleston's elite, rediscovered decades later, and remains one of the most disturbing mysteries in the city's dark history. But what they didn't know was that Delphine had already begun her plan the moment she stepped onto that auction block. To understand what happened at Ashford Manor, we must first understand Charleston in 1844. This was a city at the height of its power and wealth, but also a city living on borrowed time. Though few recognized it then, the cotton trade dominated everything. Charleston's harbour was crowded with ships carrying raw cotton to textile mills in England and the northern United States. Fortunes were made overnight, and the city's elite lived in extraordinary luxury, building grand mansions along the Battery, throwing elaborate balls, and maintaining a lifestyle that required an army of enslaved people to sustain. The Ashford family occupied the upper tier of this society. Cornelius Ashford had built his fortune through a combination of cotton brokerage, shipping investments, and land speculation. By 1844, he owned Ashford Manor, a plantation 12 miles outside Charleston proper, encompassing over 2,000 acres of cotton fields. He also maintained a townhouse on Meeting Street for the social season. The family employed over 140 enslaved people across their properties. Cornelius himself was 52 years old in 1844. Contemporary accounts describe him as imposing, intelligent, but increasingly paranoid about maintaining his status. His fortune had survived the panic of 1837, but barely, and he was obsessed with appearing successful even when profits were declining. He was known for his cold business dealings and his belief that absolute control over his household and properties was the key to continued prosperity. His wife, Margaret Ashford, came from old Charleston money. 47 years old, she had married Cornelius 29 years earlier in what was essentially a business arrangement between two prominent families. Letters preserved in the Charleston Historical Society reveal a woman deeply unhappy in her marriage, bitter about her husband's documented infidelities, but absolutely committed to maintaining the family's social position. She ran the household with rigid discipline and was known among the enslaved population as being particularly cruel to the women servants. The Ashford children were adults by 1844, each struggling with their own demons. Thomas, the eldest at 29, was being groomed to take over the family business. Medical records from Dr. Harcourt describe him as having a choleric temperament and being prone to violent outbursts, especially when drinking. He had already fought 2 duels over gambling debts and matters of honor. He was unmarried, which was unusual for a man of his age and status, a fact that caused Margaret constant anxiety. William, 26, was the middle child, and the one most overshadowed by his brother. Contemporary journals kept by family friends describe William as intelligent but weak-willed, constantly seeking his father's approval but never receiving it. He had dropped out of the College of Charleston after 2 years and had shown little aptitude for business. He spent most of his time in Charleston's gambling houses and brothels, running up debts his father quietly paid to avoid scandal. Elizabeth, the youngest at 23, was considered the family's brightest hope for a prestigious marriage alliance. She had been educated by private tutors and was known for her sharp intelligence and love of reading, but she had already rejected 3 marriage proposals, to her parents' growing frustration. A letter from Margaret to her sister dated March 1844 expresses concern that Elizabeth is too willful and entirely too interested in matters that do not concern young ladies of quality. The household staff at Ashford Manor consisted of dozens of enslaved people, most of whom had been born on the property or purchased young and trained for specific roles. The hierarchy among the enslaved was strict. House servants were considered higher status than field workers. Personal attendants to the family were given slightly better treatment, though better is a relative term in such a system. This was the world Delphine Rousseau entered in June 1844. According to the bill of sale, preserved in Charleston's archives, Delphine had been brought from Louisiana as part of an estate liquidation. Her previous enslaver had died, and the heirs were selling off assets. The documentation is vague about her life before Charleston, which itself is significant. Typically, auction records included detailed work histories. Delphine's did not. There were only physical descriptions and language skills. What we do know from various sources is this. Delphine arrived at Ashford Manor on June 18, 1844. She was assigned to work as a personal attendant to Margaret Ashford, a position that gave her unprecedented access to the family's private spaces, conversations, and secrets. Within a week, according to the household accounts ledger, Margaret requested that Delphine be reassigned to general household duties. The reason given was vague, unsuitable temperament for personal service. But a letter from Margaret to her sister, dated June 27, 1844, tells a different story. The new girl father purchased is absolutely intolerable. Cornelius cannot stop staring at her. Thomas and William circle her like dogs. Even Elizabeth seems fascinated by her. I will not have this disruption in my house. I have relegated her to the kitchens, where she belongs, and where my husband will not see her constantly. It didn't work. A journal entry from Dr. Edmund Harcourt, who frequently dined with the Ashfords, dated July 3, 1844, notes, "Dined at Ashford Manor. Noted significant tension in household. Cornelius distracted throughout dinner. Thomas and William barely spoke to each other, most unusual. Margaret appeared agitated. Only Elizabeth seemed herself, though she asked several pointed questions about the nature of obsession and whether it could be considered a medical condition. Most peculiar evening. The servants' quarters at Ashford Manor had their own separate world, their own hierarchies and networks of communication. Among the few documents that survived from enslaved perspectives is a fragment of a diary kept by a woman named Ruth, who worked in the Ashford kitchens. It was discovered in 1962 during renovation of a building in Charleston's historic district, tucked behind a brick in what had once been slave quarters. Ruth's entry from July 1844 reads, "New woman here, Delphine. She don't talk much, but she watch everything. She watch how the masters move. She watch who weak and who strong. She learning this house like she planning something. Some of us scared of her, some of us hoping." By August 1844, less than 2 months after her arrival, the Ashford family was already beginning to fracture, and Delphine Rousseau, who officially had no power, no rights, no voice, had somehow positioned herself at the center of a family that was about to tear itself apart. The question is, how did she do it? The first documented incident occurred on August 12, 1844, though its significance wouldn't be understood until much later. Thomas Ashford, the eldest son, was found in the garden at 3 in the morning by a night watchman, standing barefoot in his nightclothes, staring at the servants' quarters. When questioned, he became violent, striking the watchman and shouting incoherently about promises and lies. Dr. Harcourt was summoned and diagnosed Thomas with a fever of the brain, brought on by excessive drinking. He prescribed laudanum and bed rest. But Thomas's personal journal, discovered decades later in a trunk in the attic of Ashford Manor, tells a different story. The entry from August 11, 1844 reads, "I cannot stop thinking about her. She spoke to me today in the hallway, only a few words. She asked me if I was happy with my life, if I had ever wanted something I couldn't have. The way she looked at me, like she could see inside my mind. I went to her room tonight, I had to, but when I arrived, William was already there. We nearly came to blows before she appeared in the doorway and told us both to leave. She said, 'Neither of you is ready yet.'" What did she mean? Ready for what? Margaret Ashford's diary from the same period shows a woman spiraling into paranoia. Her entries become increasingly erratic, the handwriting deteriorating from elegant script to jagged scrawls. August 15th, 1844. She is poisoning my family, not with substances, but with something worse. I see the way they look at her, all of them. Even my own daughter spends hours talking with her. About what? Elizabeth won't tell me. Says I wouldn't understand. My own daughter. August 19th, 1844. Cornelius has stopped coming to my bed entirely. I know where he goes. I hear him walking the halls at night. Yesterday I found him in the library at dawn, staring at nothing. When I spoke to him, he didn't even acknowledge me, as if I were invisible. 29 years of marriage, and I have become invisible. The servants noticed the changes too. Ruth's diary fragment continues. Family falling apart. Master Cornelius like a ghost walking. Miss Margaret breaking things when she think. Nobody watching. Thomas and William going to kill each other over that woman. She don't even have to do nothing no more. She planted seeds and now they growing like poison ivy, choking everything. On August 23rd, 1844, the situation escalated dramatically. A letter from Dr. Harcourt to a colleague in Charleston describes what he witnessed. I was summoned urgently to Ashford Manor last evening. Upon arrival, I found the entire household in chaos. Thomas and William had engaged in a physical altercation in the dining room during supper. According to witnesses, the fight began over which brother would escort Delphine to the market the following day. A trivial matter that resulted in Thomas breaking his brother's nose and William threatening to shoot Thomas on sight. Cornelius attempted to intervene and suffered what appeared to be an apoplectic fit. I was forced to bleed him. Margaret has locked herself in her chambers and refuses to emerge. Most disturbing of all, when I questioned Delphine herself about the incident, she claimed to have no knowledge of why the brothers were fighting. She appeared genuinely confused, though I confess there was something in her eyes, a calculation, an intelligence that was unsettling in one of her station. The next day, Cornelius Ashford did something unprecedented. He gave Delphine her own room in the main house, not in the servants' quarters. The household ledger notes the change simply. Delphine reassigned to the blue bedroom second floor. This was a room typically reserved for visiting family members. Margaret's diary. He has lost his mind. He has installed that creature in the bedroom next to Elizabeth's, under the same roof where his children sleep. When I confronted him, he said it was for efficiency in household management. Efficiency! The man can barely form coherent sentences anymore. He stares at walls. He ignores his business correspondence. His associates have begun to ask questions. Elizabeth Ashford, the daughter, kept her own journal, though only fragments survive. An entry from late August 1844 provides a rare glimpse into Delphine's methods. I spoke with Delphine for hours today. She is unlike anyone I have ever met. She asks questions no one else asks. About what I want from life, about whether I believe women are truly inferior to men, or if we have simply been taught to believe so. She told me things about my family I never knew. Father's debts, mother's family's decline, Thomas's, violence toward enslaved women on the property, William's illegitimate child in the city. She knows everything about us, somehow. When I asked how, she said, I listen. People think the enslaved are invisible, so they say anything in front of us. You'd be amazed what you learn when people forget you're human. I don't know why, but I trust her. Perhaps that makes me a fool. By September 1844, Cornelius Ashford's business associates were noticing his deterioration. A letter from a business partner preserved in the South Carolina Historical Society archives, dated September 8th, 1844. Dear Cornelius, I write with grave concern. You missed our meeting last week and the contracts remain unsigned. Your accounts show irregularities. I visited your office yesterday and was told you have not been present in over a fortnight. Your clerks are worried. Your creditors are asking questions. Whatever personal matters consume you, I urge you to attend to business before it is too late. Your fortune is not inexhaustible, and in these uncertain times, even the strongest houses can fall. But Cornelius wasn't attending to business. According to household staff testimonies collected years later, he was spending his days following Delphine around the house, watching her work, trying to engage her in conversation. A testimony from Sarah, a cook who worked at Ashford Manor. Master Cornelius was like a man possessed. He'd stand in doorways just watching Miss Delphine. He'd make excuses to be wherever she was. One time I saw him in the laundry, just standing there while she folded linens. A man who ain't never set foot in the laundry before. Miss Delphine. She'd smile at him sometimes, real sweet, then ignore him for days, like she was training a dog, teaching him to beg. And then, on September 19th, 1844, everything changed. Thomas Ashford found a letter. It was tucked inside a book in the library, a volume of French poetry. The letter was written in elegant script in French, unsigned. Years later, when the letter was translated and entered into evidence during the subsequent investigations, its content was described as romantic in nature, suggesting an intimate relationship and future plans to escape together. Thomas assumed the letter was from Delphine to William. William assumed it was from Delphine to Thomas. Neither considered that Delphine might have written it to neither of them, or that she had planted it deliberately, knowing one of them would find it. The brothers confronted each other in the stables that evening. Witnesses heard shouting, the sound of breaking wood. By the time servants arrived, Thomas was holding a horsewhip and William's face was bleeding. William's words were heard by at least 6 people. I challenge you, dawn tomorrow, bring your seconds. A duel between brothers over a woman who legally couldn't even own property. Dr. Harcourt's journal, September 19th, 1844. I have been summoned to serve as medical attendant at a duel at dawn tomorrow. Thomas and William Ashford. Over what? The affections of an enslaved woman. The family is mad. All of them. And at the center of this madness is Delphine, who seems to move through the chaos untouched, serene, as if she is merely watching a play of her own devising. Tell us in the comments what you think is happening so far. Is Delphine deliberately manipulating the family, or has their own corruption simply made them vulnerable to their own desires? What would you do in her position? The dawn of September 20th, 1844 would answer some questions, but raise far more troubling ones. September 20th, 1844. Dawn broke over Charleston with an oppressive humidity that made the air feel thick enough to choke on. In a clearing 3 miles from Ashford Manor, 2 brothers stood 30 paces apart, pistols in hand. Dr. Harcourt was present, as required by the peculiar etiquette of dueling. He later wrote, I have attended many duels in my years as a physician. Men fight over honor, over debts, over insults real or imagined. But I had never witnessed brothers prepared to kill each other over a woman who could not legally consent to a relationship with either of them. The absurdity was matched only by the tragedy. Thomas's second was a business associate, clearly uncomfortable with the entire affair. William's second was a gambling companion who appeared to find the situation entertaining. The rules were established, single shot each, fire on the count of 3. But before the count began, something extraordinary happened. Delphine appeared at the edge of the clearing. According to every witness present, she simply materialized from the morning mist, wearing a simple white dress. Dr. Harcourt's account continues. She walked directly between the 2 men, stopping in the line of fire, Thomas shouted at her to move. William begged her to step aside. She looked at each of them in turn and spoke words I shall never forget. "You would kill your own blood over." "Me? Over someone you do not even know? Someone you have never truly seen? I am not what you think I am. Neither of you knows what you are fighting for." Thomas, consumed by rage and obsession, raised his pistol not at his brother, but at Delphine herself. "If I cannot have you, neither will he," he reportedly said. The shot rang out across the clearing, but Thomas's hand had trembled, whether from drink or emotion, or simply the madness that had consumed him. The bullet missed Delphine by inches and struck a tree behind her. In that moment, William fired. Not at Thomas, not at Delphine. He fired into the air, above everyone's heads. "I will not kill my brother," William said. "Not for this, not for her, not for anything." Thomas collapsed to his knees, the pistol falling from his hand. He wept. Grown man, heir to a fortune, reduced to sobbing in the dirt while dawn light filtered through the trees. Dr. Harcourt helped Thomas to his feet and administered laudanum to calm him. William stood apart, staring at Delphine with an expression the doctor described as recognition, as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time and was horrified by what he saw. Delphine turned and walked back into the mist without another word. The duel was over, but the damage was done. By noon that day, word had spread through Charleston society. The Ashford brothers had nearly killed each other over an enslaved woman. The scandal was immediate and devastating. Cornelius's business partners began quietly distancing themselves. Invitations to social events stopped arriving. Margaret's friends made excuses to avoid calling at the house, but the real horror was only beginning. That evening, Thomas Ashford locked himself in his bedroom and did not emerge for 3 days. When servants finally broke down the door on September 23rd, they found him unconscious, having consumed an entire bottle of laudanum and most of his father's whiskey. Dr. Harcourt was summoned again and managed to revive him, but Thomas was never the same. His journal entries from this period are barely coherent. "She showed me what I am, monster, weak, pathetic. Everything father said, she made me see it, made me want her so I would see it. Why? Revenge. For what? What did we do to her? What did we do? What had they done to her?" That question haunted everyone who examined the case later. The answer would come from an unexpected source. While Thomas descended into opium-fueled despair, Cornelius Ashford's world was collapsing in a different way. His business, built over 3 decades, was unraveling with shocking speed. The first sign came on September 25, 1844, when a major cotton shipment to Liverpool was rejected due to poor quality. The broker's letter was scathing. The cotton received was mixed with inferior grades, improperly ginned, and contaminated with debris. "We cannot accept this shipment and will be seeking compensation for losses incurred." Cornelius was shocked. He oversaw quality, control personally. How had an entire shipment been compromised? An investigation revealed that the cotton had been switched in the warehouse between inspection and loading. But by whom? And how had no one noticed? More disasters followed in rapid succession. A shipment lost at sea due to what appeared to be falsified insurance documents. Contracts that Cornelius swore he had signed were somehow missing crucial pages, making them legally invalid. Money that should have been in accounts had vanished through a series of unauthorized transactions. A letter from Cornelius to his attorney, dated October 2nd, 1844. "I am being destroyed, and I do not know by whom or how. Every day brings new catastrophe. My clerks claim they followed my instructions, but I gave no such instructions. Documents I never signed bear my signature. Shipments I approved never arrived. It is as if someone is sabotaging me from within my own organization, someone who knows every detail of my business operations. Dr. Harcourt visited Ashford Manor frequently during this period and documented Cornelius's deterioration. October 8, 1844. Found Cornelius in the study, surrounded by papers, muttering to himself. He has not slept in days. He barely eats. He is convinced someone is destroying him deliberately, but he cannot identify who. When I suggested it might be competitors or disgruntled business partners, he shook his head. "No," he said, "this is personal. This is intimate. Whoever is doing this knows me, knows my weaknesses, knows where to strike to cause maximum damage." He paused, then added, "I think it's her." When I asked whom he meant, he would not answer. But Cornelius's suspicions, however paranoid they seemed, had merit. Elizabeth Ashford's diary provides a crucial piece of evidence. October 10th, 1844. I cannot stay silent any longer, though I know writing this is dangerous. Delphine has been teaching me to read ledgers, to understand business accounts. She says women should know these things, that ignorance keeps us powerless. But I realize now she was showing me something else. She was showing me how my father's business operates, the false accounting, the fraudulent contracts, the money hidden from creditors. Father's business has been built on deception for years, and now someone is using his own methods to destroy him. Someone who learned by watching him, someone invisible in his own house who saw everything. Delphine had access to the house, to Cornelius's study. When he wasn't there, to conversations between him and his business partners. She could read and write in both English and French. She was, as Margaret had noted early on, trained in household management, which would include understanding accounts and correspondence. Could one woman, enslaved and legally powerless, orchestrate the destruction of a business empire? The evidence suggests she had help. A testimony given in 1889 by James, a formerly enslaved man who had worked as Cornelius's personal valet, provides shocking revelations. Miss Delphine, she had us all helping, though most didn't know what they were helping with. She'd ask Moses to mention certain information to Master Cornelius when he was drinking. She'd have Ruth leave certain documents where the master would find them. She'd have me delay delivering letters or deliver them to wrong people. Small things. We didn't think nothing of it because she made it sound like we were protecting ourselves, like we were just being careful. But she was using us like chess pieces, moving us around to make things happen, and we helped her because she was one of us, because she understood what it was like, because she promised us she was going to free us all when it was over. By late October 1844, Cornelius Ashford was effectively ruined. His creditors were demanding payment, his warehouses were empty, his ships were seized, his property was being prepared for auction. A man who had been worth hundreds of thousands of dollars was facing complete bankruptcy. And through it all, Delphine moved through the house, serene and untouchable, watching the empire crumble around her. But the darkest revelation was yet to come, hidden in Margaret Ashford's diary. Margaret Ashford had been keeping two diaries. The first was the one she wrote openly, left on her writing desk for anyone to potentially read. It documented her daily life, her social concerns, her frustrations with her family. The second diary was hidden behind a loose panel in her bedroom wall. It was discovered in 1952 during renovations of what had been Ashford Manor. The handwriting in this second diary is erratic, often illegible, the pages stained with what appears to be wine or possibly blood. This hidden diary reveals that Margaret had been investigating Delphine. October 15th, 1844. I have discovered something about that woman, something the auction house should have disclosed. I have written to Louisiana, to the parish where she was supposedly sold from an estate liquidation. The response I received today has shaken me to my core. There was no estate liquidation. The man who allegedly owned her died of poison. Not illness, poison. And Delphine was gone before the body was discovered. The authorities in Louisiana have been searching for her. She is wanted for questioning in multiple deaths. Multiple families destroyed. She moves from place to place, sells herself or is sold, and within months the families fall apart. How did she end? Up in Charleston? Who brought her here? Or did she choose to come here? Did she choose us? October 18th, 1844. I confronted her today, showed her the letter from Louisiana. She did not deny it. She smiled. She said, "You want to know why I am here? I will tell you. 2 years ago, your husband bought a girl from Louisiana, 13 years old, pretty, my niece, my sister's child. He used her and discarded her. She killed herself rather than endure another day of it. Your son Thomas did the same to a girl last year. I have the letters she wrote before she died. Your son William has an enslaved woman in the city who bears his child and lives in squalor while he gambles away money that could feed her. You yourself have beaten women bloody for imagined slights. Your entire family is built on cruelty and exploitation, and you dare ask me why I am here?" I tried to strike her. She caught my wrist. Her grip was iron. She said, "I am here because someone must balance the scales, because someone must make you see what you truly are." Then she released me and left the room. Margaret's subsequent diary entries show a complete psychological breakdown. She became convinced that Delphine was not human, that she was some form of demon or vengeful spirit. She performed strange rituals in her room, drawing symbols on the walls. She stopped eating, convinced that Delphine was poisoning her food. October 25th, 1844. She is in my head. I hear her voice even when she is not present. I see her face in mirrors. She is destroying my family piece by piece, and I am powerless to stop her. Cornelius won't listen to me. The children won't listen. The servants obey her instead of me. I am mistress of this house, and yet I have no power. She has taken everything from me without laying a finger on me. How is this possible? October 28th, 1844. I tried to kill her tonight. I took a kitchen knife and went to her room, but when I opened the door, she was not alone. 6 other enslaved women were there. With her, they were sitting in a circle. They were talking about their families, about the cruelties they had endured, about their plans, about other houses, other families. It is not just us. It is not just her. There is a network, a conspiracy. They are organizing, using beauty, using intelligence, using the invisibility their bondage provides to destroy from within. I ran back to my room. I have locked the door, but I can hear them singing. Or are they chanting? I do not know anymore what is real. Dr. Harcourt's final visit to Margaret Ashford occurred on November 1st, 1844. His journal entry is clinical but disturbing. Mrs. Ashford is beyond my help. She suffers from acute paranoid delusions and has become violent. She attacked a servant today, attempting to strangle the woman while screaming about conspiracies and demons. I have recommended immediate commitment to an asylum. Mr. Ashford, in his current state, was barely capable of understanding the recommendation, but he signed the necessary papers. Mrs. Ashford will be removed to the South Carolina Lunatic Asylum tomorrow. Before she was taken away, Margaret managed to hide her secret diary behind the wall panel. A note tucked inside, dated November 1st, 1844, reads, "If anyone finds this, know that I was not insane. I saw the truth. She is not just one woman. They are everywhere, in every great house, in every wealthy family. Watching, learning, waiting, and we never see them because we have trained ourselves not to see them as human. That is our fatal flaw. We made ourselves blind, and now they use our blindness to destroy us. I do not know if anyone will believe me. Perhaps it is better if they don't. Perhaps Charleston deserves what is coming." Margaret Ashford would spend the remaining 32 years of her life in the asylum. She never stopped insisting that Delphine Rousseau was the center of a vast conspiracy to bring down Charleston's elite from within. Most people dismissed her claims as the ravings of a madwoman. But what if she was right? The Ashford family tragedy of 1844 was buried, both literally and figuratively. Within weeks of Margaret's commitment to the asylum, the remaining family members scattered. Thomas died in 1847 from what was officially recorded as consumption, though his personal physician suspected suicide by slow poisoning through laudanum addiction. William vanished entirely in late 1844, and despite efforts by private investigators, he was never found. Some claimed he fled to Mexico. Others suggested he changed his identity and started a new life in the Western Territories. His fate remains unknown. Cornelius Ashford's death came on November 15, 1844, just 2 weeks after his wife was committed. He was found in his study with a pistol in his hand and a single bullet wound to the head. The official verdict was suicide. His final letter, addressed to no one, contained only one line: "She won. I never even saw how." Elizabeth Ashford, the daughter, survived. She inherited what little remained of the family fortune after creditors had taken their share. She never married. She spent the rest of her life living quietly in a small house in Charleston, working as a teacher for poor children. She died in 1891 at the age of 70. Her personal effects included dozens of journals, most of which were destroyed by her executor as per her instructions. Only fragments survive, preserved by accident. And Delphine Rousseau? She disappeared on November 16, 1844, the day after Cornelius's death. She simply vanished. No records of her sale, no death certificate, no trail whatsoever. It was as if she had never existed at all, except for the devastation she left behind. For over a century, the Ashford tragedy was forgotten by all but local historians and genealogy enthusiasts. But beginning in the 1950s, new evidence began to surface, piece by piece, that would reignite interest in the case and suggest that the story was far more complex than anyone had imagined. In 1957, Professor Helen Winters, a historian at the College of Charleston researching antebellum slavery in South Carolina, discovered a collection of daguerreotypes in an estate sale. Among them was an image that stopped her cold. The photograph, dated circa 1843, showed a group of enslaved women standing in front of a large plantation house. The image was typical of the period, meant to document property for insurance or sale purposes. But Professor Winters noticed something extraordinary. In the back row, partially obscured by shadow, was a woman whose face was remarkably similar to descriptions of Delphine Rousseau from the Ashford case documents. But the plantation in the photograph wasn't Ashford Manor. It was Beaumont Estate, 50 miles south of Charleston, and the date was a full year before Delphine appeared at the Charleston slave auction. Professor Winters traced the history of Beaumont Estate and discovered something chilling. In 1843, the Beaumont family had suffered a catastrophic collapse. The patriarch had committed suicide. The eldest son had been killed in a duel with his brother. The matriarch had been committed to an asylum. The pattern was identical to the Ashford tragedy. Further research revealed at least 6 other families in South Carolina, Georgia, and Louisiana that had experienced similar collapses between 1839 and 1845, always within months of purchasing or acquiring enslaved women who matched Delphine's description. Same pattern. Same devastation, same mysterious disappearances afterward. Professor Winters published her findings in a 1959 academic paper titled "Serial Destruction: Patterns of Familial Collapse in the Antebellum South." The paper was largely ignored by mainstream historians, dismissed as conspiracy theory and poor scholarship. Professor Winters died in 1963, her work unfinished. In 1978, during renovation of a building in Charleston's historic district that had once been part of the city's slave market complex, construction workers discovered a hidden room behind a false wall. Inside were dozens of documents, letters, and journals, all carefully preserved in sealed containers. Among these documents was a ledger that appeared to be a coded record of transactions, but not the kind typically associated with slave markets. The ledger listed names, dates, and locations, all cross-referenced with what appeared to be success rates and payment amounts. A graduate student named Marcus Webb, working on his thesis about resistance movements among enslaved people, was given access to the documents. He spent 2 years attempting to decode the ledger. What he discovered was explosive. The ledger appeared to be a record of a coordinated network of enslaved women who were deliberately placing themselves in the households of the wealthiest and most abusive slave-owning families across the South. Each entry noted the family name, the crimes they had committed against enslaved people, the woman assigned to infiltrate the household, and the eventual outcome. The entry for Ashford, Charleston, 1844, read, Target, Cornelius Ashford, crimes, murder of child, systematic abuse, financial fraud. Agent, DR duration, 5 months. Outcome, complete, recovered. Recovered was the term used throughout the ledger, presumably meaning the woman had successfully escaped after completing her mission. Webb's thesis, The Invisible War, organized resistance among enslaved women in the antebellum South, was considered too controversial to publish. His academic advisors warned him that without more concrete proof, he would destroy his career. The ledger disappeared shortly after his thesis defense, allegedly stolen from the archive where it had been stored. Webb himself died in a car accident in 1982. His research was never completed. In 1985, during demolition of an old building in New Orleans that had once been a boarding house, workers found a tin box buried in the foundation. Inside was a diary written in French, partially damaged by water and age, but still largely legible. The diary was dated 1846-1848. The author identified herself only as D and described a life working as a seamstress in New Orleans under an assumed name. But throughout the diary were references to the work, to sisters in other cities, to families who will never understand what they paid for. One entry, dated March 1847, was particularly revealing. I received word today that Margaret died in the asylum, still screaming about conspiracies. In a way, I feel pity for her. She was the only one who truly saw. But seeing the truth destroyed her mind because she couldn't reconcile what she knew about us as property with what she observed about us as agents of justice. The cognitive dissonance broke her. The others never even achieved that level of awareness. Cornelius died thinking he was simply unlucky in business. Thomas died thinking he was weak-willed. William fled, thinking he was a coward. None of them understood that they were targeted, that everything that happened to them was deliberate, that we are not invisible because we are powerless, but because their need to believe we are powerless makes us invisible. And that invisibility is the greatest weapon ever given to the oppressed. Another entry, dated July 1848. I am tired. I have done this work for 9 years now in 7 different households. I have helped destroy families who deserved destruction, but I wonder sometimes if we are any better than they are, if revenge makes us righteous or simply makes us vengeful. Sister Marie says I am thinking too much, that some people don't deserve mercy. She is probably right. But I still wonder who we become when we take justice into our own hands, and whether anyone will ever know the truth about what we did. The diary ended abruptly in October 1848. No further entries, no indication of what happened to the author. The diary was authenticated by handwriting experts and linguistic analysts. The French dialect, vocabulary, and writing style were consistent with educated Creole women of Louisiana in the 1840s. The historical details referenced in the diary matched known events from that period. But without definitive proof that D was Delphine Rousseau, and without any way to verify the claims made in the diary, mainstream historians remained skeptical. The diary is currently housed in a private collection, its authenticity still debated. In the 1990s and early 2000s, historians began collecting oral histories from descendants of enslaved people throughout the American South. Several of these interviews, recorded but never widely publicized, contained references to the beautiful women who destroyed the masters. An interview from 1994 with Martha Johnson, age 97, whose great-grandmother had been enslaved in South Carolina. "My great-grandmother used to tell us stories when we were children," she said. "There were women, special women, who would come to plantations where the masters were especially cruel. These women were so beautiful that the masters and their sons would lose their minds over them. And while the masters were losing their minds, these women were learning all their secrets, turning family against family, making them destroy themselves. Great-grandmother said it was justice. She said these women were avenging angels. She said one of them came to the plantation where she was enslaved, and within 6 months the master's family was gone and the enslaved people were free because there was no one left to own them." These oral histories, while fascinating, were considered folklore rather than historical evidence. But they added another layer to the mystery of Delphine Rousseau and women like her. To this day, historians debate whether there was truly an organized network of enslaved women conducting psychological warfare against their oppressors, or whether the similar patterns of familial collapse were simply coincidence, the natural result of dysfunctional families built on immoral foundations. But one fact remains undeniable. Delphine Rousseau existed. The Ashford family was destroyed, and no one has ever been able to definitively explain how or why. So what really happened at Ashford Manor in 1844? Who was Delphine Rousseau, and what was she truly capable of? After decades of research, investigations, and discoveries, we are left with several theories, none of them fully satisfying, all of them disturbing in their own way. Theory 1, the lone manipulator. The first theory is the simplest. Delphine Rousseau was an exceptionally intelligent, beautiful, and calculating woman who recognized that her enslavers' greatest weaknesses were their own desires and their inability to see enslaved people as fully human. She used her beauty as a weapon, her intelligence as a tool, and the family's own dysfunction against them. Everything that happened was her doing alone. The destruction of the Ashford family was personal revenge for specific crimes Cornelius and his sons had committed against her family members. The similar collapses of other families were coincidence, or perhaps copycat situations inspired by rumors of what happened in Charleston. In this theory, Delphine was brilliant but solitary, and after accomplishing her revenge, she simply disappeared into freedom, living out her days under an assumed identity somewhere in the north, or possibly in Mexico or Canada. This theory is supported by the documented evidence of Cornelius's crimes, the testimonies of servants who witnessed Delphine's calculated behavior, and the psychological profiles of the Ashford family members who were clearly unstable and dysfunctional even before Delphine arrived. Theory 2. The network. The second theory is more elaborate and far more chilling. based on the 1978 Ledger discovery, Margaret Ashford's hidden diary, and the 1985 diary found in New Orleans. This theory suggests that Delphine was part of an organized network of enslaved women who were deliberately infiltrating households across the South. These women were educated, trained in psychological manipulation, and coordinated through some form of underground communication system. They targeted families known for extreme cruelty, gathered intelligence, and systematically destroyed them from within using seduction, manipulation, and intimate knowledge of their victims' weaknesses. The network existed for years, possibly decades, operating invisibly within the very system that oppressed them. This theory is supported by the pattern recognition that Professor Winters documented, the coded ledger that Marcus Webb analyzed, and the oral histories collected in the 1990s. If true, it represents one of the most sophisticated resistance movements in American history, one that has been almost completely erased from historical record. Theory 3. The legend. The third theory is the one whispered in the dark corners of Charleston's historic district, the one tour guides tell late at night, the one that makes rational people uncomfortable. This theory suggests that Delphine Rousseau was not entirely human, or perhaps was human, but touched by something older and darker, that she was a manifestation of accumulated pain, rage, and injustice, given form and purpose. That she appeared when and where she was needed, destroyed what needed to be destroyed, and vanished back into whatever realm she came from. In this theory, the diary in New Orleans was left deliberately, the photographs were planted, the evidence was created to give skeptics something to grasp at, while the truth remained forever beyond reach. This theory has no documentary evidence to support it, only folklore. Only stories passed down through generations, only the persistent feeling among those who research this case that something about it doesn't quite fit within rational explanation. The truth is, we may never know what really happened. The evidence has been lost, destroyed, or hidden. The witnesses are long dead. The city of Charleston has changed beyond recognition. Ashford Manor was torn down in 1923, and a modern apartment complex now stands on the site. The slave market where Delphine was sold has been preserved as a museum, but the auction block itself was destroyed decades ago. What we do know is this: Delphine Rousseau existed. She was real. She was purchased by the Ashford family in June 1844. By December of that year, the family was destroyed, and she was gone. To this day, no one knows the truth about what happened in those 6 months. No one knows if she acted alone or with others. No one knows if she was a genius, a revolutionary, or something else entirely. No one knows where she went or what became of her. But on certain nights when the fog rolls in from Charleston Harbor and the old buildings creak in the darkness, locals say you can still hear singing in the historic district, old songs in French, haunting melodies that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. And sometimes, in the shadows of the narrow streets, people report seeing a woman in white, beautiful and serene, watching the great houses with eyes that seem to see right through you. Whether it's Delphine or simply the city's collective memory refusing to let go of its darkest secrets, we may never know. Thank you for joining me on this journey into one of Charleston's most disturbing unsolved mysteries. What do you think happened? Was Delphine a lone operator, part of a network, or something beyond explanation? Share your theories in the comments below. This community thrives on your insights, your questions, your own research and stories. If you enjoyed this investigation into the shadows of history, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. We have many more stories waiting to be told, many more secrets buried in dusty archives and forgotten diaries, many more mysteries that refuse to stay silent. Until next time, remember, history is not always what we were taught. Sometimes the most important stories are the ones that were deliberately erased. And sometimes those stories find ways to resurface, demanding to be heard. This is our haunted community. Welcome to those who dare to listen. I'll see you in the shadows.